At 9:55 on the morning of February 4, 2016, a payment order reached the Federal Reserve Bank of New York. It appeared to come from Bangladesh Bank, the central bank of a country more than 7,000 miles away. The instruction requested a transfer of $20 million. Over the next several hours, dozens more followed. Together, the orders attempted to move $951 million from Bangladesh Bank's account at the New York Fed. Five were executed. $81 million reached accounts in the Philippines, while another $20 million was sent toward Sri Lanka before it was stopped in return. Yet the New York Fed had not been hacked. Neither had SWIFT's central network. The attackers had done something more dangerous. They had taken control of the computers Bangladesh Bank used to create trusted payment messages. The central question was no longer how criminals had broken into the world's financial system. It was how they had persuaded the system to obey them. Bangladesh Bank held part of the country's foreign currency reserves at the New York Fed. That account allowed the bank to make international payments in US dollars. The instructions traveled through SWIFT, the secure messaging network used by financial institutions around the world. SWIFT does not carry money like a digital armored truck. It carries standardized messages. When an authenticated message arrives from a bank's approved system, the receiving institution has reason to believe the bank authorized it. The attackers focused on that trust. According to the FBI's later investigation, reconnaissance against banks in Bangladesh began as early as 2014. In early 2015, employees at Bangladesh Bank received spear phishing emails that appeared to contain a resume and cover letter. At least some recipients clicked the link and downloaded the payload. By March of that year, malware had established a backdoor inside the network. The intruders could move files, execute programs, and communicate in a way designed to resemble ordinary encrypted internet traffic. They remained inside for months. This was not a raid, it was surveillance. The attackers moved toward the computers connected to SWIFT Alliance Access, the locally managed software Bangladesh Bank used to send and receive financial messages. By January 2016, forensic evidence showed them moving laterally through the network and reaching the core SWIFT processing system. They had also prepared the destination. The 4 Philippine accounts that would receive the stolen money had been opened months earlier under fictitious names. Then the attackers chose their moment. February 4th was a Thursday, the end of the work week in Bangladesh. New York was open for business. In the Philippines, a Lunar New Year holiday was approaching. The timing created a chain of delays across 3 countries. Bangladesh would enter its weekend. New York would process the messages during its business day, and the receiving side would soon face a holiday. That Thursday, 35 fraudulent payment instructions were sent from Bangladesh Bank's compromised system. Because they were created inside the bank's own environment, they appeared to be genuine SWIFT messages. They directed the New York Fed to transfer a combined $951 million to accounts in the Philippines and Sri Lanka through correspondent banks in the United States. Most of the orders did not succeed. Screening systems and human review stopped or held 30 of them, representing roughly $850 million. Some payment details triggered questions, including the word Jupiter, which also appeared in sanctions screening databases. The famous spelling error played a smaller role than popular retellings often suggest. One $20 million order was intended for the Shalika Foundation in Sri Lanka, but the word foundation was misspelled. A correspondent bank sought clarification, and the recipient bank stopped the payment before the intended beneficiary received it. The money was returned. The typo did not stop the other 30 failed orders, and it did not save the $81 million already moving toward Manila. 4 orders deposited a total of $81 million into 4 accounts at the Jupiter Street branch of Rizal Commercial Banking Corporation in Makati, part of metropolitan Manila. In Dhaka, the first visible warning was not an alarm or a flashing message. It was an empty printer tray. Bangladesh Bank's SWIFT operation normally produced paper records of the messages sent and received overnight. On Friday morning, a duty officer found that the expected reports had not printed. Attempts to produce them manually also failed. At first, the problem looked like an equipment or software malfunction. That was exactly what the attackers needed. Custom malware had been designed to interfere with the bank's local SWIFT records. It could search for transaction messages, delete entries from the database, and disrupt the confirmation reports sent to the printer. Other code was programmed to erase evidence of that concealment. The malware did not have to hide the theft forever. It only had to delay discovery while the money was still moving. When bank personnel regained access to the messages, they saw questions from the New York Fed and realized that unauthorized transfers had been made. Bangladesh Bank began sending stop and recall instructions. But the response now had to cross a weekend, multiple time zones, and a holiday. In the Philippines, the money was already leaving the 4 receiving accounts. Investigations traced the funds through bank transfers, a remittance business, foreign exchange transactions, cash, and casino junket channels. Once the funds entered that environment, they could be converted, divided, and withdrawn in forms that were far harder to trace. The operation therefore depended on more than hackers. The intrusion created the fraudulent payment messages. A separate financial network moved and disguised the proceeds. The heist joined 2 systems that are often investigated separately: cybercrime and money laundering. By the time the recall requests reached the appropriate institutions, most of the $81 million had moved beyond the original accounts. The consequences spread quickly. Bangladesh Bank Governor Atiur Rahman resigned in March 2016. Investigators in Bangladesh, the Philippines, the United States, and the private sector began reconstructing how the attack had crossed so many institutional boundaries. Each organization controlled a different part of the process. Bangladesh Bank was responsible for the security of its local computers and SWIFT environment. SWIFT carried authenticated financial messages. The New York Fed held the reserves and processed the instructions. Correspondent banks passed the funds onward. RCBC received the Philippine transfers, and other intermediaries moved the money after it arrived. The attackers operated across the seams. SWIFT said its central network and core messaging services had not been compromised. The New York Fed maintained that its own systems were not hacked. Bangladesh Bank had lost control of the endpoint from which the messages were created. All 3 statements could be true at the same time. That was what made the case more important than the failure of a single bank. The payment system authenticated where a message came from, but it could not automatically determine whether the institution sending that message still controlled its own machines. The question of who directed the operation took longer to answer. In 2018, the United States charged North Korean programmer Park Jin-hak and alleged that he had participated in a government-backed hacking conspiracy associated with the group commonly known as Lazarus. A later indictment named 2 additional North Korean programmers. The FBI did not base that attribution on a single clue. Investigators connected the Bangladesh intrusion to other North Korean operations through spear phishing accounts, reused infrastructure, malware families, encryption material, proxy services, code similarities, and access from North Korean internet addresses. Those charges established the United States government's attribution. They did not result from a completed trial of the accused hackers who were not brought before an American court. In the Philippines, accountability focused on the movement of the funds. Former RCBC branch manager Maya Santos de Guito was convicted on 8 counts of money laundering. The Philippine Court of Appeals later upheld her conviction. The Philippine Central Bank also imposed a 1 billion peso penalty on RCBC for regulatory failures connected to the case. At the time, the bank described the penalty as being imposed for non-compliance with banking laws and regulations, and agreed to pay it. Bangladesh recovered the $20 million stopped in Sri Lanka, along with approximately $15 million from the funds that reached the Philippines. By late 2025, about $66 million of the Philippine portion remained unrecovered. The legal effort continued. New York courts allowed important portions of Bangladesh Bank's civil case to proceed, and court filings show that the action remained active in 2026. The heist also changed the security rules surrounding SWIFT. In 2016, SWIFT launched its customer security program. It later introduced mandatory security controls, stronger information sharing, independent daily validation reports, and payment monitoring tools designed to flag or block unusual activity. One reform addressed the exact weakness exposed in Dhaka. A bank could no longer depend only on records stored inside its potentially compromised local network. Daily validation information could be delivered through a separate channel, allowing staff to compare local records with SWIFT's independent record of message activity. The lesson was simple, but uncomfortable. Authentication proves that a message came through an approved path. It does not prove that the institution controlling that path still controls its own machines. The hackers did not enter a vault beneath Manhattan. They did not compromise the New York Fed's computers, and they did not break SWIFT's central network. They took over one trusted endpoint, then used the financial system's own language, procedures, and timing against it. $81 million disappeared. But the more important number was $951 million, the amount the system was asked to surrender before enough of its separate defenses finally said no. For more carefully researched investigations into the systems behind modern history, subscribe to Veil.